So, rise and grind has become a popular phrase in entrepreneur culture, implying that in order to have our own businesses, we have to start working the moment our eyes open in the morning, and it has to be hard. But my guest in this episode, Alyson Caffrey, disagrees, as do I. If you're working more than 40 hours a week and not taking extended time off, this episode may be the thing you need to make the next 12 months your most successful ever.
There's no wrong way to be an entrepreneur, and that's the dirty little secret the business gurus don't want you to know. They want you to do things their way, but their way may not be your way. The key to success is finding the strategies that work best for you. Welcome to the 6 Ways with Jerry Potter.
Welcome to episode number 30 of The 6 Ways. Every week, we bring on a smart guest who is thriving in their field of expertise to share their best tips with the rest of us, because I truly believe we all do better when we all do better. My name is Jerry Potter. I am an entrepreneur and a content marketing strategist obsessed with efficiency, and that's allowed me to grow a community of over 200,000 entrepreneurs looking to streamline their business and their life. And Alyson Caffrey is my guest. She specializes in helping entrepreneurs thrive by taking more time off from their business, including planning sabbaticals and maternity leaves. Welcome to the show, Alyson.
Jerry, I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, when you get two people that are excited about the same topic, they're always ready to geek out over it, right?
Oh,
And
yeah, right?
and I'm a big believer in rest, but you take it to a whole new level when you're talking sabbaticals and things like that, which I've never done. But I am curious. I know that you have young kids. Were you this passionate about rest before the kids, or was that something that came once they came along?
No, I was not this passionate about rest before kids. I'll be straightforward. I think a lot of my early business success, I did subscribe to a lot of the hustle culture and the get up and grind and do it. And for a time there, especially in the early years of getting the business going, there was a lot of that push through the milestones and be really stubborn and all those things. And then when I had my kids and my business became more than just me. So it's around the same time I developed a really amazing team and some leaders in the business. I couldn't just be so singularly bullheaded all the time. I created an environment around me that needed me at my best. And that meant I needed to rest, right? I needed to be in a position where I showed up confidently, presently, calmly, right?
Yeah.
And that was a critical element that I needed to develop. So a lot of my passion around rest was because I needed to develop this habit, or otherwise I was going to burn my business and just run everything into the ground.
I was absolutely a workaholic, and I've always, even when I was an employee, I got to do something I loved, and so it was just hard. I didn't want to stop working because I loved it, and
Yeah.
that's true with a lot of entrepreneurs, which is what makes this hard. So kids was the thing that helped me get it in check as well. But I have to tell you, you said when you brought on a team, I remember when I was going to hire my first person. I wrote up an SOP, a standard operating procedure, like step by step, with just the most tiniest details outlined. And it was basically to take a coaching call that I was recording on Zoom and then put it up as a replay in the hub for my paying members. And I had my wife take a look at it. I'm like, hey, can you just look at this and tell me if it looks okay? And she looked at it and she goes, you can't pay anybody to do this. I said, why not? She goes, it's 83 steps. This is insane. This is so overly complicated. And it was the first time that I kind of went, oh, that probably is overly complicated. And it became very real. So I think I cut it down to about 30, eliminated some things that were not as important. And now I'm glad to have a team that can do that. And I know how to write an SOP for other people, because as you said, you can't burden others with some of that stuff. So
Oh, absolutely. I love that you highlighted that, Jerry, because I think a lot of early stage entrepreneurs struggle to delegate, which effectively does get them, some additional time on their calendar and all those things. And then they overcomplicate it in their brain by way of being too stuck in the weeds or industry expertise or whatever else. So that forcing function of having somebody come in and actually be running your process
mhm.
helped you develop a more simple, cost effective and results driven business. Like that is excellent. It took on another life cycle, right? One that was more efficient and simple.
Yeah. Well, and as a recovering perfectionist, I mean, I was pretty stubborn. It took me a while to get there, like nobody else can do. Nobody else can do this. I have to do it myself. So, all the growth we go through as entrepreneurs. So, all right, we're going to share
Yeah.
6 ways entrepreneurs resting can increase their success. Allison brought three, and I brought three. Also, our question of the week from Kyla, who says, I'm a parent, and I'd be curious to know if you have any tips for getting more rest as a parent and an entrepreneur, which I think Allison and I can both chime in on. So, we'll do that before we wrap up the episode today as well. So, 6 ways entrepreneurs resting can increase their success. Number one, Allison, what do you got?
Yeah. So the first is creating habits or a cadence of rest. All of us need to begin somewhere. Oftentimes, when I talk with entrepreneurs and they hear about my book title, The Sabbatical Method, I get one of two reactions. Oh, wouldn't that be nice? Or, oh, I wish, right?
Yeah.
Like just completely discounting it as impossible for them or unreachable for them. And so what I say is just like any challenge that you want to complete in a business and life or any skill you want to develop, you have to first develop the habit, right? So a cadence of rest intentionally in your life or in your business could look like creating a boundary to shut your computer at 6 p.m. or going out in the middle of the day to take a walk around the neighborhood to just reset, take your brain off of things and make sure that you're building in that critical time of just the white space of the day. Because almost sometimes when I have a cadence of rest in my business, I'm walking outside and I'm just kind of leaving my desk for the day, I get hit with brand new ideas. I get inspired all over again. It's kind of like doing my morning over. So I feel like I get a
Mhm.
second chance at the day. And then increasing that cadence at a rate that feels comfortable to you. So maybe it's first and foremost just closing the computer at 6 p.m. But then eventually you take your full weekend off and you don't check your email. And then eventually you can get to the 1 week vacation and all those other things that, we all dream about taking, fully, undisturbed.
Yeah, it's very hard to disconnect on vacation because we're so connected. But I've heard of some people too where they'll even have a work computer and then a separate computer, and that way it's a different desktop background. Maybe it looks different. Maybe one's a Windows and one's a Mac. I mean, if you wanted to go to that extreme, but I
Mhm.
agree, it absolutely starts with the habits. So, all right, next up, number two, 6 ways entrepreneurs resting can increase their success. And this is something I did recently that's worked out really well, and that is to separate your work time from your self development time. So, as entrepreneurs that are always trying to grow and thrive, we join masterminds, we take classes, we read books, in addition to things like taking care of our health. And I found that that was all just blurred together. And so, a couple of months ago, I did a time audit and I found a couple things. One, I was working more than I thought because I prioritize lifestyle design quite a bit. But two, I just kind of saw there was this gray area where I'm like, okay, is that working or is that not working? Because I was working
Mm.
on a side thing or a passion project. And that freedom of entrepreneurship gives us that ability to do that. But what I did was I reformatted my workday so that 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. with a little lunch in the middle was work time, and then self-development time was the other time. So I would go hiking before 9 a.m. I would read books, I would think about other things, and then after my kids were home from school around 3:30, if they were occupied and doing homework and didn't need help, then maybe then I would sit in the backyard and do self-development time. But it did a couple of things. It just gave me more clarity on how my week worked, but there was also I think it's Parkinson's law in there where a task will take as long as we give it, essentially.
Yes.
And so as soon as I went to 9 to 3, all of a sudden my productivity shot up. But then since self-development was more like rest for me, like I considered that rest time, reading and things like that, it also gave a specific time for that instead of having it all blur together.
Mm. I love that, setting out intentional time for professional and personal development. I actually track those habits separately, so I'm like an insane tracker, for the most part in my business and my personal life. I don't ever recommend that anybody go to this level, like, it's almost an addiction, but I did something similar, Jerry, this year, as I was like, "What am I working on developing as a leader?" Like, outside of all the things that I'm doing in my business and as a my fitness and my personal health and all those things. Of course, it's excellent. And then what like new skill do I want to develop? And how can I keep that front of mind? And I love that you've blocked out intentional time for that. I personally haven't done that, but now I'm going to.
Well, and it reminded me of it a little bit again when you talked about, having a second day that you start your day. And
Yes.
and so by doing the stuff kind of for me, but for the future of the business, but visionary time and health and all that before 9 a.m. It was like I felt like I got a ton done, and then I started my workday,
Mm,
which was effective
yeah.
as well. So, all right, next up, number three: 6 ways entrepreneurs resting can increase their success. Allison, what do you got?
Yeah, consider a non-traditional type of sabbatical, what I call the leadership sabbatical. So if
Okay.
you're in a position where you are, solopreneurship or stuck in the weeds of the business and you have a team behind you, you could consider kind of drawing that proverbial line in the sand and saying, listen, I'm going to kind of remove myself from the doing, but I'm going to continue to steer the ship and be the leader and make some of those core decisions and develop the strategies. So I call this the leadership sabbatical when you can start to get out of the weeds of the business, but you're still very much available to help develop the people under you and
Hmm.
feel really confident for future developments of sabbatical, like the full on taking a couple months off or, going on an undisturbed vacation. This is a great way to dip our toe in the water, especially if we have a team that feels really capable. We feel like we've got some resources in place for them. This can free up the mind too. Oftentimes, when I work with entrepreneurs, one of the biggest systems, hurdles that we have to overcome is that they can't see the forest through the trees.
Hmm.
And if you're stuck in the weeds of your business pretty significantly, you're running all the projects and you're putting out all the fires and doing all the things. It's actually really, really hard to see your own throughputs. So, even just
Yeah.
for the overall enjoyment and the clarity of your systems, of your direction, of your vision, taking a leadership sabbatical and getting out of the day to day and only working on developing the business, I find provides massive immediate ROI for the people that walk through that particular cadence.
So for a leadership sabbatical, like what's a minimum duration you feel like for that to be effective?
I would say at least 30 days.
Okay.
And I think
I was afraid
and
you were
I'm
gonna say
serious.
that.
I think it's excellent because if you think about it, right? I don't think 2 weeks or a week is enough snapshot of everything that could quote unquote go wrong or that the business could experience, right? You're doing everything in a life cycle of 30 days, right? Your marketing budget's usually a 30-day budget and all of your clients are usually working in about a monthly-ish cadence, right? If you're running a membership or a coaching program or whatever that looks like. So
Mhm.
to me, I'm like, let's experience all the things that could happen in a 30-day clip and then ask myself the question, is my team capable? Are they enthusiastic? Are they able to define throughputs or, new, how do I put this? New opportunities and ways of getting better and growing and kind of bring new ideas to the table? Or is this something that we constantly feel like we're stuck in the mud over? Do they not have the resources? Do they not have the enthusiasm? Where is that repetition happening? And it can be really eye opening, especially if you plan to grow your business to the next level. So I'd encourage anybody who's feeling a little burnt out by their business, unsure where to go next, to try something like this.
Yeah.
Or if you're like, I have massive growth goals for 2024, I want to double my income or any of those things, you need to ask yourself what's going to break. And so when your
Yeah.
time comes limited, that's a really great practice to start to unveil what's going to break if the team doesn't have clarity.
Okay. I'm glad you said that because I don't think I fully understood what you were saying the first time. So a leadership sabbatical is essentially you're still working, but
Mhm.
your team is figuring out how to do things without you.
Mhm. That's
Got
exactly
it.
right.
Okay, okay. Because I was something about the way you said it the first time, like, and you're still available. I was still picturing like you're available if something goes wrong, but you're still kind of overseeing it, so you're available to jump in at a moment's notice if
Mm.
if there's an emergency, which there rarely is.
Right.
But yeah, okay, okay. I love that.
We manufacture these emergencies, right, in our brains. Things feel so much more urgent than they actually are. And I call this in my book the coach, right? So in the beginning of, working in through this leadership sabbatical, being available doesn't mean solving their problem for them. It means coaching them through potential solutions, right? So
Mm.
you're leading. You're leading them.
Yeah. Last summer, my family took a 6 week trip to Japan, Australia, and New Zealand. I fully intended to work. I love being able to work anywhere, but I wasn't able to work nearly as much as I thought. I mean, from jet lag and time changes, but also just not wanting to miss out on these
Mm,
amazing places. And so when I got back, the first conversation I had with somebody on my team was not next summer, but the summer after that. I want to see if I could take 2 months almost fully off. because we'd love to go to Europe, and Europe is, all the countries are so close to each other. So that was kind of, yeah. So I could see doing a leadership sabbatical. Yeah, I love
Mhm.
that. Okay, next up, number 4, and this is just a weird little hack. But as we know now, in this day and age, for most businesses and certainly online business owners, you can hire people anywhere in the world. And so it occurred to me, if I hired somebody that's overseas, in at least 8 hours different time zone, they can be doing the work while I'm sleeping. People like that model. Some people like people that are working at the same time as them. I think depending on the size of your business, you could have both. But
That
but
makes
yeah, I
sense.
I, I think when you can use that time shift advantage, you can alleviate some of that might worry you overnight.
Oh, of course. And it demonstrates the power of your systems and your SOPs, right? If you can hand it to somebody who you need virtually no contact with, right, in the daylight hours, and they can get work done while you're sleeping and you can get work done while they are sleeping, that just completes the asynchronous working cycle, right? It means you have a strong SOP, it means you have a strong system, it means you've got a
Mm.
capable person who's able to do those things. So I just love that cadence.
Yeah. All right. Next up, number 5 of 6 ways entrepreneurs resting can increase their success. Allison, what do you got?
Do not disturb. And this means taking the vacation, taking the actual time away for whatever duration that you see is important for your business. This is where we start to get into true blue sabbaticals, maternity leaves, right? Where we are not checking anything related to our business. We are not in a position to be leading any direct initiatives. This doesn't mean that if we're taking a 3-month long sabbatical or a 3-month long maternity leave that we're not in a position to have defined the vision, the goals, the direction for the people who are going to be working in the business while we're away. But what this means is that we're trusting
Hmm.
that we've defined the direction and the focus so specifically and supported the team so directly in the months preceding that we feel like we can disconnect from this business asset and really connect with what's most important to us, which is our family, ourself, our personal relationships, and those types of things. And I've seen so much massive success on the back end of sabbatical in the folks that I've worked with. And I think it's really undervalued rest and complete disconnection. Because how many times have you been doing something that just completely lowers your cortisol levels, like jumping in a hot shower, for example, and all of a sudden all these ideas are like rushing into your brain, right? This is really, really, really critical for somebody who's wondering what's the next phase of my business, right? I've hit a level of success or I've grown this organization. What's next for me, right? How can I serve my people at a deeper level? What are they actually wanting from me? What do I actually want for myself, for my life? And I think oftentimes if we subscribe to the hustle culture and we're always in momentum and we're always in motion, then sometimes we can pick our head up if we don't have the map out and be like, well, where the heck are we? Right? Did we
Mm.
go 10 miles in the wrong direction? And I think the massive success point of going in full do not disturb mode is that we almost can't let what's going on in the business directly inform where we go next, right? We can really disconnect and really, really build the next version of how we act in our business intentionally.
Yeah, I find about 4 days into a vacation is when all of a sudden I can like see the future because I'm just far enough
Totally.
away from everything that was happening. So, yeah, that's great. All right, next up, number 6 of 6 ways entrepreneurs resting can increase their success. And this is, a little bit similar to what you just shared, Allison, but it is to set firm boundaries for everyone around you. And I want to share a quick story. When I was still an employee, I worked at an agency. I was the creative director, and I was basically in charge of most of our client relationships and certainly our biggest client relationships. And if you asked me, I would say family comes first. But my actions were completely different. My wife worked evenings at the time, and she was at work. I was home with the 2 kids, and my son was telling me this magical tale of something that happened on the playground at daycare that day. And sometimes your kids aren't talkers, and so when they do talk, that's a special moment, and everything should be put aside for that. But my phone beeped and I looked at it and I said, "Oh, hang on. Sorry. I just got to take care of this really quick." And I went in the other room to reply to a client message, all this kind of stuff. By the time I got back, both kids had eaten and the dog was on the table basically finishing my dinner. And it was this moment of, "Oh my gosh, what am I doing?" Thanks to the dog for pointing this out to me. And so the next day I said, "Okay, I've got to set firm boundaries. And so I contacted all of my clients and I just said, hey, I'll reply to emails. I think I said within one business day. If it's an emergency, here's my personal cell phone number, which I didn't like to give out before. Text me if it's an emergency. And what happened was I never got any texts. um, Emails that would previously sent, like if somebody would email a Googleable question, they didn't do that anymore, right? Because they knew it might be
Mm.
24 hours. And oh my gosh, life got better. And I was a little worried. I had, that I don't know what that syndrome is where you're like, did I get a text? When you're checking your phone, they talk about it in teens a lot now, but I was checked. Did I miss anything? Did I miss anything? And you know what I found out? One, there's almost no emergencies. And two, I'm not that important. Like in the grand scheme of things, people can handle themselves. And I think as an entrepreneur, the same thing goes for your clients now or your team or anything like that. And so if you set firm boundaries, most people will respect them. If they don't, they're probably not the clients you should be working with or the people that should be on your team. And even for, I have a friend that's a longtime real estate agent. You think real estate agents work weekends all the time, right? Showing houses. He's had this 20-year amazing career and he does his whole thing. And then he says, by the way, I don't work on Sundays. That's family time. Is that going to be a problem? And I think in 20 years or something, he said one person say, no, it's the only day I can look at houses. And so he passed them on to somebody else. So I always love that story because people will respect your boundaries if you just lay them out there.
That's a beautiful story, Jerry. I think a lot of folks are afraid of that, right? They're like, my clients are going to leave me if I tell them I don't answer emails on a weekend or that I
Mm,
won't show them houses. And I think honestly, it's the leadership. Like you tell somebody that you have these boundaries and then it allows them to reflect on whether they keep those types of boundaries for their life and their
mhm.
family and all the things, right? So I love that. It's leadership. I think they probably respond really positively because they're like, man, Jerry's doing it. He's prioritizing his family. I should also probably do that.
Yeah, I should probably do that. Well, and I didn't tell that story for a couple of years because it was just, I was embarrassed. I
Yeah.
couldn't believe it when it happened. But then once I made the switch and fixed it and saw how easy it was like, okay, first, I think I maybe brought it up with a couple of close friends. And then it was like, okay, now I want to tell the story to everyone who will listen because I think it's
Mm.
important to hear that. So, all right. Our question of the week is from Kyla. Kyla says, I'm a parent and I'd be curious to know if you have any tips for getting more rest as a parent and an entrepreneur. So I'll let you go first, Allison.
Oh, I have a pretty I don't wanna say confronting, but perhaps confronting. A lot of what we've been talking about here is prioritizing what's important and creating boundaries and, developing rhythms around some of those habits of rest and that kind of thing. And I'd encourage this individual to consider what is eating the time, right?
Mm,
So a coach of mine calls them vices. And when I was quick story. When I was early postpartum with my first son, I had just enough milk production, which is pretty, stressful for a new mom. You're wondering, like, if my baby gets super hungry, are they going to be able to eat? And I never seemed to have a surplus. And it was really just anxiety driving for me. And I remember reading an article that said, if you drink really hoppy or really like milk stouty beer, it's actually really, really great for your milk production. I actually thought it was just because having a beer probably decreases your stress levels, makes you relax, all those things.
mm,
But there was a short time, and also something, Jerry, I'm not super proud to share and don't frequently do. But there was a time early postpartum with my first son where I was so stressed about being a new mom, providing milk, and doing the whole thing that I was like justifying having a beer or two at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
mm,
And I'll say this that at the time, I was like, "Oh, this is helping me relax. It's gonna increase my milk production." But in the back of my mind, I was like, "This is a scapegoat. We're doing hard things. We're developing as a new type of leader in our home." And it was just not what I wanted for myself and for my family. So I'm not saying that this is this particular scenario for the person who asked this question, but things like alcohol, television, just screen time in general, I've noticed over the years are assassins of our time, right? They
mm,
are really completely disqualifying some of the rest, right? If I have a glass of wine or two or three, all of a sudden my sleep quality goes down. So then finding time in the following day becomes more challenging. So I and my husband and I have been really, really disciplined in trying to find our time assassins and the things that eat our time, like alcohol, like really sugary food, like television. And it's been challenging at times, but also when it starts compounding, then you're like, wow, you don't find time. You create the time by stripping some of the other things away. So focus there on what's eating your time first and foremost, and then I think you'll find almost like finding spare change in your drawer. You're like, "Wow, I have so much surplus of other things I can be doing in my day."
I want to point out one thing you brought up, which I've never really thought of it this way. When we think of time assessments, and I've heard that phrase, quite a bit, it's kind of like the things we're using our time on when we could be using it on something better. But you
Mm,
specifically mentioned like dietary things where it's like,
mhm,
it doesn't take long to
mm-mm.
sip a beer while you're doing something else. It's the effect later because you got an hour worse of less sleep or didn't sleep well all night or whatever it might be. So yeah, I never really thought about it that way. I like it that way. Kyla, I will say I use my kids to set boundaries for my business. And so if you have like some of it starts with just setting your priorities, what is most important, and not just what you say is most important but what you truly believe, and you're going to act on it. And I think that helps us kind of prioritize that. And so early on when I first left my day job, it was after I had kids and had this business, I my first goal was to never let them see me work if I didn't have to. So I truly
Mm,
tried to only work while they were at school, or when I was trying to get things started, sometimes I would work after they go to bed. And that worked really well for me. Pandemic came along, we were all home together all the time, and now my boys both just think I work all the time. Like as if I'm holding my phone because I'm a marketer, or if I'm holding my laptop, I could be on my laptop watching puppy videos or working on taxes, and they're like, "Oh, dad's working again." And so for any parent, I would encourage you, if you have the capability to work when your kids aren't there, then they don't see you work. Not that they shouldn't know you work, right? It's not like it's a secret. We want our kids to know that you have to work usually when you grow up. But um, it kind of got undone by the pandemic. But I'm trying to get back to that, and so I've used the way I want my kids to envision me, and my priority of spending as much time with my kids as I can while they're young, to force my workday to be in a tighter window. So maybe that'll be helpful for you, Kyla, as well. And I don't know how old your kids are. So if you want to take a deeper dive into anything we talked about today, you can go to the sixways.com/30. And Alyson has a great resource, a planning guide for anyone planning maternity, along with a lot of other stuff if you're not expecting, that you can find. And this maternity planning guide, though, is brand new. You can get it right now. Just go to mastermaternityleave.com, and of course we'll include that in the show notes as well. By the way, word of mouth is the number one way that new people discover and grow their businesses from this show. So if you found this valuable, please think of one person you can share it with, because I truly believe we all do better when we all do better. And if you like this episode, a couple others you might enjoy: 6 Ways Busy Entrepreneurs Can Prioritize Their Health. That was episode 23. And 6 Ways Entrepreneurs Can Get 10 Hours Back Every Week. That's episode number 26. Links are in the show notes or description wherever you are or watching. So thank you so much for being on the show, Alyson. Loved this conversation.
me too, Jerry. Thank you.